very simplified. That's the way I draw Sandos. The Sandos are a lot more complex, but things that are research or part of the story, I try to do as much research on as I can. However, there are things I get wrong, and when I get things wrong, I hear about it. I once had Usagi play a game of Go with another character. Now, Go is a board game that uses these round pieces, and I used to play Go as a kid. However, what I didn't know is that I wasn't playing Go, I was playing a game called Gomoku, which uses the same board, the same game pieces, but the objectives are much different. It's like comparing chess to tic-tac-toe. And when I had Usagi say, I won the game of Go, where I heard about it from emails from as far away in Germany saying, that's not Go, that's Gomoku, you idiot. Usagi first comes out as comic book. And then it gets reprinted in trade paperbacks. So I was able, it first comes out as these comic books, pamphlets, and then gets reprinted as a trade. So I was able to buy a book of Go. I went to the website of the American Go Masters Association, and who knew there was such a thing. I was even able to attend a Go tournament in Little Tokyo. And so I was able to correct that mistake. Not only did I correct it, but the final game board is the pieces are the same pattern as this famous game that was played in 1859 between two Go masters. And I was waiting I'm still waiting for someone to come up and say, I saw that. That's it. So I tried to do as much research as I can, and I have done stories about, Mike here had referenced my story, Kaiso, which is where Usagi comes to a seaweed farm. And that came about because I was in Salem, Massachusetts, and they have the Peabody Museum there. And they have a wonderful Japanese wing. I want to visit that place for a long time and do some study there, research there. And they happened to have an exhibit on Japanese seaweed farming. So I took a lot of notes there, and I just talked to my parents one day, and they said, I'm thinking of doing a story about seaweed farming. And they said, we've been to a seaweed farm, we have pictures. And so between the Peabody Museum and their photographs, I was able to get as much of a documentation of the seaweed farming as I could. And I thought that would turn out to be a good story because, well, first of all, I'm probably the only Western cartoonist that has ever done a story about Japanese seaweed farming. But I've also done stories about soy sauce making, taiko drums, various festivals, and sword making, all kinds of stuff, whatever interests me. And or things like a word or something in a documentary might spark an idea. Once I was watching a documentary on the mountains of Japan, and one sentence said, "Oh, there's a grapevine bush which has a speck of gold in the berries, and it's usually found around gold mines." And oh, that's pretty neat. So I did a bunch more research, and I did a story based an entire about 6 or 7 issue story based upon that one line. And so ideas come from all over. Now, let me tell you about some of my other characters. We're fixed for time. Now, Usagi was based upon Miyamoto Musashi, the 17th century samurai. There are other characters that I have. Most of them are completely original, but there's some characters that I gleaned from, again, inspired by history or by Japanese popular culture. One person from history is Tomoe Ame, and she is a female samurai. And she was inspired by the life of a samurai woman named Tomoe Gozen. Again, she lived during the Genpei Wars, which I spoke of. Now, she is an ally of Usagi. She's actually the bodyguard of the Geishu lore. The Geishu clan actually did exist. It was in where present-day Hiroshima is. That's again where my father or my ancestors came from. But Tomoe Gozen was famed for her beauty as well as her spirit of fighting, and she was very good. One story has her fighting against a general. He ripped off her sleeve and she killed him. He was the consort of Lord Kiso, and Lord Kiso himself conquered Kyoto, which was the capital of Japan at the time. And his older brother resented that fact, of course, so he drove Kiso out of the city. And finally, Kiso was surrounded by the enemy. It was just Kiso, his 5 generals, and Tomoe. He ordered Tomoe away from him, not because he wanted to save her life, but because a samurai warrior to die with a woman at his side was a disgrace. So Tomoe Gozen jumped on her horse, attacked the opposing army, cut off the general's head, and went on to become a nun. But that's the type of sort of character I wanted for Tomoe, a very strong, beautiful samurai woman. And most of my female characters tend to be very strong. But that's the story of Tomoe.